If you guys let a lack of intimacy persist for too long in your relationship, I don't think it ends well. I don't think people stay long term in a sexless marriage. I think that's, to me, enough of a stick.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Birth Lounge podcast. Have you been looking for a way to prepare your partner for birth? I know you know how important it is that they're educated on not only like what's normal in birth, but also what are your options? How can they help relieve some of the sensations and pains of labor? What positions can they get you in? How can they support you in pushing? How can they advocate for you? But I also know that it's pretty hard to find information, resources, classes, courses that are, kind of specifically for a dad supporting you in labor. And so I wanted to introduce to you Dad Days. This is a course obviously meant for husbands so that they can understand everything I just said. I'm going to talk them through what normal birth looks like so that they can understand what is normal and safe and expected and what's not. I'm going to talk to them about variations in labor and what they should do, what they mean, and if they need to call the doctor, if they can reassure you that things are safe, if they can say, oh yeah, remember he taught me this in Dad Days. I'm also going to teach them about the psychology of things. I want them to understand what these changes feel like for you mentally, emotionally, physically, so that they can be the best support. We're also going to talk about each stage of labor and how they can help you with pain relief and comfort measures. Then, of course, I'm going to prepare them for afterbirth. We're going to talk about how they can support you in maintaining a positive and calm environment, how to be an active listener. We're going to talk about what they need to know about postpartum emotions and hormones and how that may impact your relationship and what role they can be to be the best support for you. And then finally, because we know the science so strongly suggests that having an educated and supportive partner of breastfeeding can be such an influential factor in your breastfeeding relationship, I'm also going to prepare them for breastfeeding, what they can do to bond with your baby, what they can do to encourage you to bond with your baby, and how do you re-split up the household tasks because you're going to be taking on all of baby duties or the majority of it, and so they are going to have to pick up some other slack in other ways. What will that look like? Dad Days is designed to change your partner's life. This is not only going to prepare them to speak up and advocate and support you and understand what you're going through in pregnancy and postpartum, but it's really going to empower them to have the confidence to be that active participant in parenthood where they are not just showing up to do the task, but they're actually active, they're engaged, they enjoy it, they bring ideas to the table, they have the confidence to take the initiative to make your workload and your life balance easier. I want this for you. I created this course to help you educate your partner alongside the information that I give you in the Birth Lounge. And so you can think about the Birth Lounge and the Dad Days course as kind of a husband and wife. The Dad Days course is specifically for dads. The Birth Lounge is made for moms, but also your partners can go through it too to learn so much. So they go together. They're like peanut butter and jelly, but do know that they can stand alone as well. If you want to learn more about that, you can visit thebirthlounge.com/dad days. That's DAD. D-A-Z as in zebra, E, Dad Days, because postpartum can feel a little foggy, but our Dad Days course is going to bring clarity to dads around birth. See you there.
Hello. Alexis here today to bring you a little intro. It is Valentine's Day week, so we thought we would bring you a couple episodes about relationships this week. Today's episode is an important conversation for anyone navigating big emotions inside their relationship, especially during seasons of stress, transition, or growth. He is joined today by couples therapist and relationship coach Jonathan Van Viegen to talk about emotional dysregulation, what it actually looks like in real relationships, and how couples can move toward connection instead of conflict. They explore how stress, unmet expectations, and life changes can impact communication, intimacy, and emotional safety, and what actually helps couples reconnect. This conversation also sets the stage for Friday's episode, which focuses specifically on how relationships shift after baby arrives and what partners can do to protect their connection during the postpartum season. Together, these episodes offer practical tools, perspectives, and reassurance that relationship strain doesn't mean something is broken. It means support and skills matter. And we especially wanted to highlight this at a time when lots of people are focusing on their romantic relationships. So settle in, grab your pen, and start thinking about ways you can reconnect this weekend.
Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited to have you, and I'm so excited for this topic. And I was sharing with you before we started recording that I think this is a topic that a lot of us deal with, and we're eager to learn more. But, in true fashion of the internet, we often get these mixed signals and we can sometimes get misinformation. And so I think a really good place for us to start, especially for this conversation, is just laying the floor groundwork for what is the definition of dysregulation.
I mean, essentially for me, dysregulation, I'm always looking at it from a perspective of couples, right? So that, and I see it as a spectrum. So whether someone goes silent, stonewalls, they kind of amp up and they do that fight or flight. One of the chapters in my book I'm writing is talking about a couple where there was a plate thrown at someone's head, right? So that's kind of the extreme end of dysregulation. Dysregulation is basically, in my view, when someone basically can't manifest their emotions in a healthy way, where they really struggle with that. And that shows up obviously in relationships all the time, right? It's usually not often that we're dysregulated on our own. So it's always going to have some type of event, something that kind of kicked it off. One thing I've noticed though with couples particularly is they focus too much on the dysregulation, and that becomes a dominant narrative in their story, and also what they tend to notice the most of. And what they skip over entirely is when there's that regulation, when there's that emotional connection, when someone's moving through conflict, hard feelings, difficult conversations in that positive way, because of their worldview and that's been tainted ultimately by their worldview, tainted by their relationship. They lose that ability to see anything beyond that dysregulation. And the way I kind of describe it is, I see couples in a relationship in and of itself is a beautiful thing. It's probably one of the most divine relationships that we can have. It's not one that we're biologically connected to. It's not our children, it's not our parents, not our siblings. In a romantic relationship, we actually choose the person that we want to be with, which is what makes that relationship so beautiful, right? And because that couple is pristine, they have this beautiful relationship. Dysregulation to me is when that snow globe that they find themselves in gets shaken up so much that you can't see that beautiful couple holding hands. That wedding type snow globe, you can't see them anymore, but they're still in there. It's just they've lost the ability to see what's good and the good in their relationship. So
Okay.
that's my view of dysregulation. On a side note, dysregulation doesn't bother me at all, maybe because I came from a very traumatic childhood, but as a couples therapist, you get really good at sitting with people in dysregulation. So nothing really scares me at this point, but even that plate throwing incident that I'm describing in my book.
Okay, I was gonna say, I have done a lot of work making sure that not only am I a regulated human and that I can recognize when I start to get dysregulated and that I don't live in this constant state of dysregulation,
Mhm.
but that as a doula, I'm comfortable with other people's
Yeah.
dysregulation because
Yeah.
as someone who attends labors, someone can have done so many things to have done quote unquote the work. You can go to years of therapy, you can do all the childbirth education classes, you can do all the breathing, you can meditate for years. And in labor, it can sometimes put you in this position or this state of being where you are dysregulated. And so I too feel very comfortable. I won't say that nothing scares me anymore because there's certain things where I'm like, oh boy, that was intense. But I do feel very comfortable being with someone and holding space with people who are dysregulated. But I'm wondering what is happening in someone's brain and their nervous system when they are dysregulated, and does it require you to have that background of trauma? I too had somewhat of a traumatic childhood growing up, and I have a tumultuous relationship with my own mom. And I feel like that has led me to have dysregulation. And so that's what prompted me to do the work. But is it possible that someone can be dysregulated and they don't share in the past that you and I have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what happens with dysregulation is that people they run smack into a wall of expectations that they struggle to get over that wall. And that's really what causes dysregulation, in my view. They have this expectation that their partner should receive what they want to say in a way that they want them to receive it, but that doesn't land all too well. And so they hit this wall of expectation that what I'm about to say is going to be either accepted, you're going to like it, you're going to see it, you're going to validate it, you're going to hear it. And when that doesn't happen, that's where someone gets that, those negative emotions, the pain, anger, frustration. And on the flip side of that, when someone doesn't feel safe, they have this expectation that they can't share what they want to share because they don't feel safe enough to do that. So again, they have this expectation in a relationship that I should be able to share openly everything about me, my feelings, what's going on for me. But when they can't do that, that is another unmet expectation. So really dysregulation is so heavily tied to expectations that someone has for the relationship, for their partner, for themselves even. And when things don't live up to expectations, that's where we get dysregulated.
So, is dysregulation in part having almost an empty toolbox where you're not able to have the tools to manage your own expectations?
I think that's a great way to put it. Not only do they lack the tools to manage their own expectations, they lack the tools to be able to see through to the other side. They can't envision themselves getting over that wall of expectations, which is what ultimately causes them to feel powerless. That's when someone becomes dysregulated. They don't feel like they have control over their emotions and how their behavior manifests, the things they say or do inside of that argument, right? So, and I think a lot of that has to do with lack of self-awareness and lack of self-reflection. I think the better we get to know ourselves, to understand our own expectations, to be able to move through them, it just becomes an easier process to speak openly when that frustration, when that expectation is not being met, right? And it's again someone who doesn't know themselves really well. And really, why doesn't someone know themselves really well? It's because they're running up against a lot of fears of their own ability to be successful and move through conflict, and also fear that their partner won't be able to move through a conflict. So then again, they are left feeling powerless. So
Hmm.
mhm.
Okay, so my own therapist once told me a few months back that not everyone is capable of doing self-reflection. And I said, well, that just can't be the case. That just can't be true because everyone has the ability to sit and reflect on themselves and learn deeper. And she said, yes, everyone has the actual capability, but not everyone is there where you are, he, mentally and emotionally to be able to actually sit with the dark spaces of themselves or the things that are you know, shameful, embarrassing, make them feel guilty, things that they're not proud of. And instead of shying away from those, lean into them and move through them and use them to their advantage in the future. And honestly, Jonathan, it took me a couple of weeks to really grapple with that idea because I just had such a hard time understanding, like, why wouldn't someone want to look deeper into themselves? And why wouldn't they want to sit with those pieces that could be improved and that would make them happier, make their lives feel lighter, make their relationships flourish deeper? What do you have to say about that?
That's a great question. I'll be kind to that therapist without saying that you should look for a new one. You know, when you're a chiropractor, you think everyone needs their back adjusted.
Mhm.
And so when, you know, someone like that is looking through the lens of people are broken, they don't think that someone, or that they certainly don't think that there are people out there that exist that, you know, can be fixed, can learn, can grow, can get ahead of their own demons. You know, you start looking through the lens of, you know, the ER doctor who sees risk everywhere, for example, right? So a therapist to say that there are people out there that can't be self-reflective, I think is a fixed mindset. I think it's defeatist. And I think it's ultimately, yeah, looking at people as if they're broken and that they can't fix themselves or they can't get better or they can't show up better. When really I don't operate that way. I operate from a place of hope, a place of optimism, I guess. I believe in humanism. I believe that people want to do better. They just struggle with the tools. And so, you know, my daughter struggles with reading and math. Does that make me want to say you'll never be good at reading and math, so why bother? Of course, I would never say that to her. So if I wouldn't say that to her, I would never say that to another person. That said, do people need more time? Do people need willingness? Let me ask you this, like, what if that therapist didn't have a good connection with that client and that therapist didn't make that client feel safe enough to open and be self-reflective? Now, is that therapist pouring their judgment on a particular client? And so, long story short, I think people can take a lot of time. I think people can, you know, my father didn't wake up and become self-reflective until 2 days before he died. So, you know, it can take you 68 years. But that doesn't mean I think you throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think everyone has the capacity. I think if as long as they're a willing customer, they'll find a way.
Okay, so
So
that's ultimately where I landed, is that I just don't think I agree with the therapist on that. I do think that everyone is capable of self-reflection, and I think that you're right when it comes to you have to be willing to sit with that. And so I think where I landed personally is that people may not necessarily be open to reflection, but they are capable. And those two
for
things are
sure.
different, right? So that's just
Well,
that.
and it's also going to be because I know a lot of your listeners are moms.
Yeah.
So there's in the DSM diagnostic criteria for ADHD, for example, if a child presents with a number of different symptoms, you know, they could be diagnosed with ADHD. What they don't tell you is that one of the disclaimers to that diagnosis is that if the child is presenting in the psychiatrist or in the physician's office and not displaying any of those behaviors, that doesn't mean that the child's doesn't have ADHD. So there's this big giant disclaimer that, you know, a child should have ADHD based on all the reports from teachers and parents and aunts and uncles and whatnot. But if they're not displaying that in this moment, in this, you know, therapist's office, psychiatrist's office, don't allow the lack of symptomology in that meeting with that child to say that they don't have ADHD. And so that to me raises a big red flag because, you know, someone needs a therapeutic bond with the people that they work with if they're going to be self-reflective. If they don't have that therapeutic bond, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're incapable of, you know, becoming self-reflective and growing and learning. It just means that maybe in that particular moment they don't have the ability or, you know, basically the bond with that therapist, or it could be with that person that they're married to. Like if someone doesn't want to be self-reflective in this relationship, is it all on them that they're incapable of being self-reflective? Or maybe do they not feel safe enough in their relationship to be self-reflective? And these are bigger questions that we need to be asking, and not just lay the diagnostic criteria at the feet of someone who has a difficult time being self-reflective. But then that brings up another really interesting point. Well, what do you do in a marriage with a couple that want to stay married where one of them doesn't make the other feel safe and the other doesn't show any signs that they can be self-reflective? Again, do you throw the baby out with the bathwater? No. A good therapist is going to want to work with them the way that, that physician would want to work with that child, presenting with ADHD symptoms. It's about meeting our clients and meeting people where they are, seeing what their capacities are, seeing what they're capable of, and nurturing that and growing it and watering that. Bamboo takes 5 years to grow underground, and then it shoots up in 5 weeks, right? So maybe you need to put in a little bit more time. So
Okay, I felt a lot of listeners out there take a deep breath and clutch their pearls when you were like, maybe it's not just your partner. Maybe it's the way that you're receiving them or responding or even reacting to them when they do share their stuff. So I want to get there, but before I do that, can you share what are some of the signs and symptoms that you yourself may be dysregulated, and then maybe some signs and symptoms that your partner is dysregulated if you are in this relationship where you so desperately want to work things out, but you're almost at an impasse of like, I don't know where else to go?
for sure. That's a really great question. I'm really big on body language. So you can see it instantaneously. I feel like I'm a plant that can read energy, in a room. I should have been one of those plants that just kind of grew when you played positive music like Bach or Tchaikovsky or something. You want to pay attention to your own body language. My wife, bless her heart, never gets dysregulated. She's the most fantastic, amazing woman and the most even keel. I'm the drama in our relationship. So it's something that's very near and dear to my heart because I struggled with anger my entire life, and I speak openly about this on Instagram too, my own journey. And now it's to the point where I mildly raise my voice when one of my daughters hits the other, and all of a sudden daddy's mad. So I've got to be very careful in a household full of women, girls. That said, though, you really want to just pay attention to your own body language, your own physiology, and really kind of look at the energy that you are receiving in that moment. And the minute it starts feeling hot, do you want to lean into that, or do you want to just say, hey, let's hit pause here and come back to this? I think a lot of couples fail to see the signs that we need to, take that break between the first and the second quarter, and they feel like they got to push on in order to seek the repair. And this is what I teach clients all the time is you can't repair when you're so flooded with negative energy. See, negative energy shuts down all of your higher faculties, your ability to be creative, think imaginative, positive, problem solving, all of that basically shuts down. Those are the God-given higher faculties that differentiate us from cows and pigs. And so when you're in that flooded state, well, think of it like a brainstorming session. Have you ever done anything well in a brainstorming session when people are negative? It doesn't work like that. You've got to remain in a good energy. So what I tell couples is reconnect physically. It's all about reconnecting physically and kicking the problem down the road. Kick the can down the road. So when you're angry that your husband or your wife left something on the countertop, didn't do the laundry, doesn't want to be intimate, you don't want to try to work out that issue in the here and now. What you want to do is you want to physically reconnect and find some way to build physical and emotional safety in your connection. And then when you're feeling good and the cortisol and the adrenaline's come back down to earth, that's when you go to repair mode. That's when you hear people say, I'm really sorry for that. I should have done this better. I didn't think. And typically when someone says that, when someone really says a deep, heartfelt, I'm sorry, without adding a but at the end, then the other softens too, and then you guys can move on to the repair. But too many times couples try to jump to that repair first. So
Yeah, okay, so much like you, I am the one that has big emotions in our relationship, and my husband is so even kill, and he is so good at repair, and he apologizes easily. And when we get in these little tiffs, he wants to repair right then. And I needs some time because, like you said, I have learned about myself that if we repair right then and there, I am more likely, I run the chance of saying something that I just don't mean, but I also haven't thought through. And so for me,
Hmm.
it's really important that I take some time and let myself cool off. I'm a hot-headed Aries. I'm a firstborn daughter. I am a business owner. So I do tend to have a lot of masculine energy. And so I really want to keep that in check when we are repairing. And he is someone who he is a high up executive. He's a firstborn son, but he has a younger sister, which I do as well. But I think there's a dynamic play here where
Hmm.
he grew up in a family that had much more feminine energy than I did because we were all girls. And at some point, that girl on girl
Hmm.
headbutting just changes you in a way that a brother and sister doesn't. And so we've had to learn how to kind of like repair. And at this point, we've been together for, well, either 11 years if you're hearing this in 25 or 12 years if you're hearing this in 2026. And so we've been together for a long time. We've learned how to do that. But for couples who really struggle with that repair and maybe saying sorry is really, really hard, what tips do you have for them other than restore that physical connection, which my husband's so good at? His favorite thing is to come down and just have like a silent, like 30-second hug. And sometimes when I'm not ready, you guys, I will literally roll my eyes and I'm like, I don't want you to touch me. I am not ready for this yet. And it is just such a good reset when I'm ready and when I'm open to it. And it does restore that connection where then we can talk. And it does, for me personally, restore my nervous system where I can be open to a conversation and hearing his side of the story because, our brains are so ugly and they make up all these narratives of like, he meant to do that and he did it on purpose and that was rude and
Hmm.
oh, this
Hmm.
and that.
Hmm.
Where that narrative in your brain is almost never the true narrative of what happened.
Yeah, we need to future trip the good in people and not the bad. And I think that's the biggest challenge or the biggest problem couples face. If I were to give couples a concrete tip, it's understand that we're all adults here, and I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of theory that you can convert into an affirmation that will help you as a practical tip to move through conflict and repair. The theory first: just because someone makes a mistake doesn't mean they're a bad person. And we can forgive people for their mistakes and still think they're a good person at the same time, as we should. It's not a either or situation in which someone needs to believe that they're somehow flawed, broken, imperfect when they've done something to hurt or upset their partner. And I think this is where people get caught a lot. Definitely in the dialogue that I hear between men and women, it's a man gets overly defensive. Why does he get defensive? It's because he believes that by admitting fault, by opening up and being transparent, honest, and being forthcoming, he is somehow a bad man, a bad person. And I think that is probably the most important tip that I could give people. If you need to tell your partner, I love you and you hurt me, you are a good person and you hurt me, then he needs to hear that and she needs to say that more often. If he needs to tell himself that, just because I made a mistake doesn't mean I'm a bad husband, a bad father, a bad anything, a bad man. He needs to run that affirmation through his head, because I think too many times couples conflate behavior with identity, and they think that what someone says or does is who they are, and it's not in any way, shape, or form. We all have the ability to be thoughtless, lazy, and sensitive, usually multiple times a day. So just because we're thoughtless, lazy, and insensitive by lunch doesn't mean we're a bad person. It just means in the moment we're being thoughtless, lazy, and insensitive towards our partner. And we just need to understand that it's our job as adults to separate what someone does versus who they are. And the way I would really relate this, you get a lot of moms out there that are listeners. I will challenge you to tell your son that he's a bad boy when he hits his friend for taking his toy car from him. We don't parent that way. We don't send that message at all to children. We speak to our kids about their behavior all the time. We don't do that. That's not what we do in this house. That's not how we treat people. That's how we talk to them. We don't go out with, you are always this, you're that, you're bad, whatever. And it's that language of conflation of saying what someone says or does is who they are. That's where couples run into trouble. So to build those affirmations and remind each other that you can make a mistake here and I still love you. You're still a good man. You're still a good woman. And I'm going to tell myself that just because I've made a mistake doesn't mean my character, who I am, my identity is somehow flawed. I just made a mistake. So,
Okay, and what about partners who put so much weight on themselves to make the other person happy, almost in a self-sacrificing way?
I mean, that's the classic people pleasing, that my wife does all too well, can drive me crazy. I'll get to the bottom of the totem pole because everything else and everyone else is more important. I sometimes laugh. It's easier to get a lawyer on the phone than my wife at times. That said, when someone's in that people pleasing phase or, mindset, I call it a phase because that means it's not fixed. Someone can grow beyond that. When someone finds themselves in that, they ultimately are worried that people are going to think that they're good enough, right? That's where, and again, right, just me saying that someone thinks that they're good enough as a man, as a woman, am I good enough? If I'm asking myself if I'm good enough, I'm asking, is my identity good? Is who I am good? Am I a good man? Am I a good woman? So I think you got to tell yourself that it's okay to disappoint people. It's okay to make mistakes. You're still a wonderful, good enough person, right? And I think that's what people pleasers run into. So they
And
have difficulty.
do you think their partner has some responsibility in that? So let's say that I was married to someone who was that people pleaser and I had identified like, okay, their inner child is saying like, am I good enough? Do I have a responsibility to remind them and say like, you're good enough. I love you the way that you are. It's okay to disappoint people. That's part of life. And it also is not a reflection of who you are or how good you are, or how much you're loved by the people who love you.
For sure. Good question. I would say if you want to be happily married, it's probably a good idea to remind someone on a day-to-day basis. The reality is with our own children, why do we tell them that we love them 15 times by lunch? Right? We tell our children all the time, every single day that we love them. I mean, I kiss my girls on the head all the time. I smother them with love. Why do we do that? We do that because I want my two girls to get the message that they're lovable. That's a message that I want them to have so that when they go out into the world, they'll find a man who makes them feel lovable, who will remind them that they're lovable. And it's important because it's, again, building up their identity. And so they don't have to believe me, but it's certainly up to me to want to send them that message, right? So if you really want to help your partner move through that, are they good enough? Yeah, it's not your job technically. And, on Instagram, there'll be a ton of relationship experts and therapists to tell you it's not your job to build someone's ego up. But I would ask, why wouldn't you? Why, if we would do that with our children, wouldn't we do that with our spouse, right? So
Yeah, if you really love them, I think you do have a role in making sure that they recognize that they are loved and that their mistakes don't define them.
for
And that
sure,
also, like, you're allowed to make mistakes. We're allowed to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. That's
for
just
sure.
part of the human experience. Okay, now my question is about attachment that you have to that partner. So, do you think that your attachment that you have with your partner is going to show up in different places in your relationship, in what triggers you, in how you respond or react when you are triggered or dysregulated, in the ways that you repair and come back together?
I would certainly say attachment to me is, under the umbrella of safety. And so I think what it is a couple, or what a couple should do, is really cultivate safety inside of their relationship. I don't believe in attachment styles and attachment theory in that regard, mostly because it's flawed in a million ways. It's diagnostic. It really just gives people a fixed mindset, gives them a new identity to adopt. And if that was the case, then I would not tell my 12-year-old to ever pursue anything because she struggles in math and English, I would say, go work at Walmart, for example. Of course, I'm not going to do that. So why would I want to attach any type of diagnostic attachment style to my wife? Why would I want her to attach that to me? We wouldn't. So I teach couples to never use that word attachment inside of their relationship. I would never build a description of myself operating in my relationship using a particular attachment style. I would say the same to my wife, and I'll tell you that. I'll tell your listeners that. What you want to do is ask for what you want. And so if you really want that message that you're lovable, I think that it's, instead of trying to understand how you show up and respond or react to your partner based on the things that they say or do, and try to, understand how you're flawed and somehow broken because of your attachment style, I prefer to ask for what we want, which is safety. I want you to unfollow this woman on Instagram. Great. How can I unfollow her quickly and show you? How can I show you that you have nothing to worry about? How can we build a relationship bubble around ourselves that tells everyone in the world that we're, this restaurant's closed for business? If I need that type of safety and security in my relationship, I want to be able to just ask my wife for that and vice versa, right? And so it's, again, that expectation that I can't ask her, or if I do ask her, she's going to say no. Well, then now that's going to come out in your attachment styles. I'm going to be anxious. I'm going to be insecure, whatever, right? But then you got to ask yourself, if my husband or wife would do something that would poke that attachment style bare of mine, am I married to the right person? Am I in the right relationship where they, would rather, give into their porn addiction as opposed to, grow and mature and be a man that doesn't need to, devolve into that type of behavior, or check out other women, or let guys buy me a drink at the bar? We need to decide what type of relationship that we want and what type of bubble we want to put around that relationship. And I would rather just simply ask, we want the safety, we want security, we want honesty, trust, transparency. Let's build that. And if that's what I want, and I'm going to my wife and she's coming to me with a request of what she wants, my only natural response should be, how can I help you get what you want? Right? So you want to feel secure in this relationship. His only acceptable response to that request is, how can I help you feel secure here? Right? That transcends all attachment style nonsense conversation. We don't even need to have that conversation. When he's asking, how can I help you get what you want, and vice versa, do we even need attachment theory inside of relationships?
What a powerful question. Okay,
So
so what about the couple who has one partner? And I love that you say that it's equal. That's what we have, and it is truly a safe relationship. And I think that so many people don't have that because it's a one-sided relationship, right? You have one partner who is asking, can you unfollow this person? Will you stop watching porn? Can we have a date night? Can we have more open communication? And you've got the other partner who is stonewalling or not open to it, or they get defensive, or they say things like, God, you're always complaining. Like, I can never do anything right. Now, where do those couples go?
that's a great question. The big neon sign word that's hanging over your head right now is the word resentment. And so it's resentment that blocks people's ability to say, how can I help you get what you want? There's something there, some unmet want or desire. And I don't use the word need. So that's another word that you can eradicate from your relationship, is the word need. If there's a want or a desire on his side that he's not getting fulfilled, it's quite likely going to cause him to not want to show up in the best way that he can inside the relationship, right? And vice versa, that resentments build. It's very rare that just one partner has resentment and the other one doesn't. So a couple in that instance, what they really want to do is say, how can we kick resentment out of our relationship, and what would we replace it with? Right? So rather than just simply talking about the thing that we don't want, which is, I don't want to be angry with you, frustrated, resentful of you, how would I rather be instead? How can I show up in our relationship better today than I did yesterday? And the reality is that not a lot of couples ask that. And certainly the couples that are struggling with resentment don't ask themselves that question. Another vow that I give couples all the time is to hold your partner's well-being ahead of your own. And that's a really difficult one that I find a lot of people struggle to wrap their head around, because they're like, well, if I'm holding their emotional well-being ahead of my own, well, who's got my back? Well, the reality is they should have your back, right? If you only kept your emotional well-being front and center and they were holding your emotional well-being front and center, no one's holding their emotional well-being front and center. And so there's got to be this reciprocity, which is, the opposite of resentment. Well, it's the antidote, I guess. So
How come you think partners aren't asking those hard questions, especially about resentment of, what stops a couple from having these really raw and transparent heart to hearts?
I think it's because people want to make money and therapists like their jobs, to be honest. I think if more people ask these questions about how do we get what we want? How can I help you get what you want? I think 80% of us therapists would be out of business, right? You wouldn't need us. You wouldn't need my weekly newsletter that I put out every single Monday, right? It's it's not taught. This type of stuff is not taught all that often. You only have to open up Instagram and you'll scroll and find a million people posting about attachment styles and why you're this and why you're that. People love to diagnose. They love to understand more about the problem. The reality though is that when you get more connected and you try to understand the problem, all you're doing is connecting yourself even more viscerally to the thing that you don't want. So now not only are you and your partner talking about what you don't like, now you're talking about the diagnosis as to why you do the things that you don't like. No one's talking to you guys about what you would rather trade all that for instead. And so the questions that I believe in asking are, where are you going? What do you want? How do you get there? As opposed to, why don't you have what you want? Right? So
So it's more forward thinking than it is like, where did you come from?
100%, 100%.
February is the month of love, right? But if you're a new mom or deep in postpartum haze, roses and dinner reservations probably are not on your radar. So let's talk about a different kind of romance, the one between you and your bed, your softest PJs, your coziest blanket, the kind of comfort that whispers, you deserve to feel good again, mama. You are not new to hearing me talk about Cozy Earth. It's absolute magic on your body. This Valentine's Day, skip the lingerie you don't even wear and gift yourself the softest, most luxurious pajama set made from viscose from bamboo. These pajamas are breathable, helping you sleep cooler than cotton, and it keeps your temperature just right without overheating. Plus, they're stretchy in all the right places and somehow make you feel a little bit like yourself again, even if you haven't slept more than 3 hours in a row for the last few weeks. Cozy Earth brings a little indulgence to the everyday life so that you can slow down and truly savor this season. And if you're spending long hours on the couch snuggling your baby like I do, or feeding continuously, or just trying to stay awake while scrolling, Cozy Earth's classic cuddle blanket is next level. It's heavy enough to feel like a hug, but soft enough to make you melt, and big enough to wrap you and your baby. Honestly, it's giving Valentine's Snuggle Fest, but make it postpartum chic. Mama, this February, you don't need fancy gifts or candlelit dinners. I mean, honestly, who wants to even put on a pair of jeans at this point? You deserve comfort. You deserve softness. You need you, held in the coziest way possible. Visit CozyEarth.com and use code HEHE at checkout to save 20% off. Write yourself a love letter. Again, that's CozyEarth.com. Celebrate everyday love with comfort that makes the little moments count. Use code HEHE at checkout to save 20% off. Because the most romantic thing you can do for yourself this Valentine's Day is take care of the woman that's becoming a mother. Do you think resentment is the number one reason that partners and couples get into therapy?
I think it's a big reason. I think emotional immaturity is another big one. I think female over emotional maturity is another big one. I think that I was thinking about this today that, men, and I actually just did a post on Instagram about this. Men could rise to the emotional maturity of a woman. And I think that's what most women want from their men. But the reverse could also happen. A woman could actually choose to lower her emotional maturity and just go with the flow, go in the moment with their partner. If he can't talk, that doesn't mean that he lacks emotional wherewithal and understanding of himself. It just potentially means he doesn't want to talk in that moment and he needs space. It Men typically don't love to engage in long conversations. I even hear with my wife, she's always excited to pick our girls up from school because when you pick them up, it's that car ride home that they talk. And I love that too. Don't get me wrong. Now I'm probably a little bit more emotionally mature than most men, mildly, but the reality is that sometimes, harmony and zen, and you look at the Eastern religions, and sometimes really just operating with grace, kindness, and forgiveness goes a long way too. We don't need to patch every single pothole in our relationship that we come across. Sometimes they're not deep enough and they're not worth your time. And so, you're going to hit them and you bounce a little bit, but you'll move through it very quickly. The sinkholes, yes, you need to address and you need to tackle. But I think if men and women were to move towards each other, he get better at being emotionally available and she, lowering her threshold from time to time of what constitutes emotional maturity, I think we would go a long way. So
Are there things that you can do to draw your partner in to make it easier for them to express what they want to express and feel safe in sharing what is on their heart, especially for a partner who maybe is a little resistant to doing that, maybe because of how you've reacted in the past, or maybe because of past relationship that they have been in that they aren't used to someone who is safe, or maybe it is past trauma that has nothing to do with you or your relationship. It's just
mhm.
something that they carry into your relationship.
That's a great question. The That should be done kind of in the halftime huddle. So you don't want to be doing that in the moment, because in the moment, again, you're going to be flooded with those negative emotions. What you want to do is after, as a couple, you've moved through that conflict, you want to ask yourselves, what did we do well? What more could we do that would have, taken that fight from, say, 2 hours down to an hour, 20 minutes down to 1 minute? You want to be doing that debrief of what your successes were and not just debriefing what went wrong. And I think, a it's just a big missed opportunity to sit down with your partner and say, I really like the way we moved through that. Let's do that again. Let's practice that. And instead, the focus is to try to solve it inside the boxing match. But it's typically, yeah, it's going to be an uphill battle for sure. So.
Do you think quicker repair is better?
Yeah, definitely quicker. One of the goals I always give clients is how do you focus on repair and moving through as quickly as possible? And so again, what I would do is I'd be sitting down not in the middle of repair. I'd be sitting down brainstorming what else could we do to signal that we're safe, to reconnect. Is that, me touching your knee, a smile? I tell men, for example, go sit down when you're having an argument as opposed to standing up. Men are big, our voices are deep, we're broad shouldered, we're far more, intimidating than women. And I think a lot of men would do well to, be aware of that and to try to lower. And that's on that physical plane of existence, right? So you want to match their physicality. So let a woman know that she's safe. And really what a woman does when she doesn't feel safe is one of two things. She either runs away, she becomes that cat that finds the corner, or she'll try to get louder because she wants, to scratch so that, he'll run away. But I think it's a man does a really good job to remember that she's little, she's smaller, she needs to feel like she's, that he's not bringing the threat inside the home. And see, men, we guard and provide and protect our families from everything in the external world. We don't want to be that angry beast that brings that threat into our home. We don't want to be the one inviting that into our house, right? So a man does really well to remember that. So
Okay, so as someone who says, well, I need a little bit to kind of cool off. I need some space to regroup before I'm ready to repair. And sometimes that is 20 minutes, sometimes it's an hour, depending on the quote unquote offense. It may be a day. Talk to us about the myth of needing space.
So in that particular instance, what I would do is I would say, you know what, sweetheart, take all the time you need. Come back to me when you're ready. And then I would throw a pattern interrupt. I would say something like, you know what, while you're over there, I'm just going to run over here. I'm going to do some groceries because we've got dinner planned. Or, there's laundry. I'm going to be over here doing the laundry. Throw some type of pattern interrupt where you're letting them know that they can take all the time they need, that you're ready to come back. But in the meantime, you're still going to be inputting into the family system, right? That you're not checking out and running away, but that you're staying present, but you're just, you're not going to force someone to do something. And I would say the same with, the woman to go out to the garage, change the oil on the car. I'm going to go make dinner. Whenever you want to come back and chat, let me know. And it's that pattern interrupt that says, our life is still going to move forward. So you can count on, we're going to get through this and we're going to go back to our regular routine, but take all the time you need and come back when you're ready. So I don't think space is a bad thing for sure.
It's that safety and security. I think for me, what you just said really struck a chord in me of like, even when we have misalignments or disagreements, or we have these little tiffs, you're still safe and our relationship is still secure. And I think so many people out there don't have that. They fear that with one little misstep or one misalignment or a big disagreement, is he going to leave me? Is she going to go seeking the attention of other men in her life?
Mhm.
Is our whole relationship going to crumble?
Mm-hmm. And that's because, and I live by this. The sign of a really highly intelligent person is someone who can hold two ideas in their head at the same time, opposing ideas simultaneously. So we should all, strive to hold pain in our mind at the same time that we hold joy, right? So just because we're having an argument right now doesn't mean that we can't go out and have a wonderful dinner tonight, or that we won't, get to there. But if I shut down and stop prepping dinner, or, cancel the dinner plans with our friends because all I'm focused on is the thing that I don't want, which is this fight, we lose the ability to, we become that horse with the blinders on, and we can only look, we got that tunnel vision, right? And so we've got to understand that I can experience pain and joy at the same time. I may not be feeling joyous right now because I'm in the middle of a fight, but when I hit pause and I zoom out, my partner's maybe taking a bit of space. I look around, we've got a beautiful home, great kids. There's a lot that's, wonderful in this relationship. We're just hitting a rough patch. It doesn't mean that it's all or nothing, that it's all good or all bad at the same time. Those two can coexist. So I think a lot of people would do well to remember that just because it's painful doesn't mean the joy disappears. So
Yeah, it doesn't mean that the end is right there.
yeah, not at all.
Coming.
Not at
Okay,
all.
so you just mentioned a rough patch, and I think a lot of couples, especially if you've been together a long time and things like resentment creep in, or maybe the mismatch of home labor, or even things like having children and being stressed in life, job stress, career stress, financial stress. One of the rough patches that I think so many of us are familiar with, which is kind of embarrassing to talk about, so a lot of us don't talk about it, is the loss of intimacy. You just stop having sex. And then
Yeah.
at some point, you look back and say, gosh, it's been months since we've had sex, or for some people, years. Talk us through, how do we start to reconnect with our partner and reinitiate that intimacy for a couple that wants to?
Now, assuming they've acknowledged their resentment and they've said, we've got to do something about this resentment and kick it out of our relationship, because really it's going to be that resentment that gets in the way of the intimacy, right? On one side, I mean, there can be physiological reasons why a couple isn't intimate, and that could have to do with, dysfunction, menopause. It can, after childbirth, there could be lots of reasons why intimacy, struggles. My take on it is that we need to row in the same direction. And so, when I see a couple that has been struggling with intimacy, you always see it show up in their communication. And so, those couples that are down to once a month, they're already in the danger zone when it comes. There's already things that they're not saying to each other. They're not communicating feelings, thoughts, emotions. They're already starting to hold things in. And that's for the couples that are down to the once a month. For me, once every 2 weeks is danger zone already. So you don't want to allow the bacteria to continue to grow, and pretty soon you've got sepsis, right? And then you're going to die. You don't want your relationship to die a slow death of lack of intimacy. So what you guys want to be doing is you want to sit down and you want to ask, how could we reintroduce or get close enough to bring intimacy back in our relationship? We don't need to have the answer. What we want to do is just ask ourselves that question. How can we bring intimacy back in our relationship? If you've got two people genuinely asking themselves and they really give a crap enough about the answer, they'll start looking and finding the thing that they want. My daughter wants to be Instagram famous. She's already starting to make, YouTube famous. She's making shorts. She's doing that. She sees dad doing it, so she wants to do it too. When someone has built a vision in their mind of what they want, they'll find a way to go out and create it and make it happen. The thing with intimacy is you got to turn over a lot of stones. Like there's not one silver bullet to get a couple to start having sex again. It could be testosterone, hormone replacement therapy. It could be better communication. It could be more date nights. It could be, chipping in more at home and not, giving her the full load if she's a stay-at-home mom. It could be a number of different things. But someone who says, I have this vision of a deeply connected, intimate, affectionate relationship in my mind, and you share that same vision with me, we will find a way to make it happen. But you've got to get on the same page that that's what you want. The way I kind of describe it, and Bob Proctor is a famous personal growth guru that passed away a couple of years ago. He would always tell the story of Van Gogh was asked how he painted his paintings. And Van Gogh said, first I dreamed my paintings and then I painted my dreams. Van Gogh was such a good painter. He didn't need to know the how-to of, putting, ink on canvas. He had to have the image in his mind first. And I think what a lot of couples lack is they lose the ability to see that intimate, affectionate relationship. They had it once in the honeymoon phase, but they've lost it. And so what you want to do is you want to go back and ask, how can we get that back? But you've got to have that vision of what that's going to look like in the first place. So you're going to start talking about what will be taking place on a day-to-day basis. How will we be showing up? Where will the kiss be in the morning, the kiss in the evening before bed, the hug in the kitchen, and then, hanging out, watching our favorite Netflix show. And then how would we slowly start introducing sexual intercourse? That's the image that they need to build in their mind. And then they'll start asking how to do that. And they'll on their own do that once they've got that vision in their mind. So
Do you think healthy couples have sex once a week or more?
I would say, for me, once a week would be low. I think, you want to be aiming for 2-3 times a week. Is to me, 2-3 times a week is a fantastic number.
And for people out there who are like, oh my God, Jonathan, I couldn't even imagine having that much time to myself or to carve out that much time for me and my partner. What do you say to them?
I think whatever feels good in your natural rhythm, where where you and your partner, if you guys are once a weekers, great, and that works, and you guys are communicating really well. Every couple's going to be different. My relationship, we're probably we're above the 2 to 3. We're in that range. My relationship's amazing these days. Things work really well in that department. So, but that's our natural rhythm. You want to find your natural rhythm as a couple. And just because I say 2 to 3 times a week is excellent doesn't mean that for the lower libido couple that once a week isn't great. It's great too. If you're down to once a month and that works for you guys too, don't let me tell you, make you feel bad that that's not good, because that's not what I'm doing. I'm speaking about the bell curve. I'm not really speaking about the extremes. Whatever feels good to you guys in a way that, you know, I'll say she's giving more, he's accepting less, whatever. That's typically the dynamic that men want it more, women want it less. Both of you need to move. He's got to accept disappointment and, not getting as much as he wants. He'll accept that a little bit better if she's investing and inputting a little bit more than she would naturally want to desire. I think you guys have to find that middle ground together, what your natural rhythm is. So.
And what about initiation? Do you think that it is one partner's job based on gender, I think is what comes to my mind, to
Yeah.
initiate sex? Do you think that it falls on the partner who has that higher libido? How can partners kind of navigate the idea of initiating sex?
It's a tough one. And I think just simply asking that question, how can we create a safe relationship in which my initiations aren't going to be met with extreme rejection and disappointment? I've got to feel safe, because the reality is one partner is going to initiate all the time and the other's not. In my own marriage, I initiate all the time. 17 years in, I can probably count on one hand how many times when my wife's initiated. It doesn't bother me though. That's just who she is. And so am I going to trade, her for someone who no, I would never trade my wife for anyone. So it's just who she is. So, okay, I accept it. So if we've built safety around me being able to go and asking her for sex anytime I want, and it's going to be met with yes, or it's going to be met with not tonight, but tomorrow will be better. That's the relationship. That's the type of safety that we want to cultivate. Someone should really be encouraged to express what they want. If you want sex, you should absolutely be encouraged to ask for it anytime you want, understanding though that you may not get it, right? Give someone an off ramp for their disappointment, allow them to hit the eject button, so that they're not wallowing in disappointment. It actually happened to my wife last night. We were going to have sex last night, and she came to me and she said, I got a headache and I'm running on 5 hours sleep. The first week back of school for the kids. She's a stay-at-home mom. She's running around like a chicken with her head cut off. I'm like, great, no problem. But she said, not tonight. And I was like, we're just missing something here. She was like, what? I was like, well, you know what? If you just sprinkled in, but you know what? Tomorrow's going to be fantastic, or later this week. She's like, you're absolutely right. And that's the type of safety that we want. You want to give someone an off ramp for their disappointment, but definitely don't shut them down in their, don't say that they should never initiate anymore. Because really, what are we talking about? I want to be physically intimate with no one else on this planet but you. When I want sex with you, it's because you are the only person I want to be with. I mean, that's a pretty big compliment, don't you think?
Yeah, that's a huge
So,
compliment. I think it can be really hard and even awkward to reinitiate that sexual intimacy once you've had kind of a dry spell. And so when you do initiate, if you are rejected, whether it be kindly or not, it can feel like a huge disappointment. And it can
yeah.
almost feel as if, well, why bother? Or I'm never going to try that again. So, how do you feel about scheduled sex? So maybe every Thursday you check in with each other and you know that it's the night that you have sex, or every Thursday you check in and make sure that you have at least had sex in the last 7 days. I know therapists feel different ways about this. So, what's your philosophy about scheduled sex?
I think it's great. I mean, we schedule our chiropractor appointments, we schedule our gym time, we schedule our sleep. I mean, I know every night I go to sleep at 11 o'clock, right? So I think I would never tell a couple that what they're doing is bad. I
Mm.
that requires me to pass a judgment. So if someone wants to schedule sex, I say schedule more. If that's what you like, do more of that. And certainly if it works, I would never tell a couple not to schedule sex. That said, though, I think what a couple does is they have a conversation. What feels good? If we want to reintroduce sexual intimacy into our relationship, I think it's really important that you've got a carrot and a stick option here. The stick is, and take it from me, if you guys let a lack of intimacy persist for too long in your relationship, I don't think it ends well. I don't think people stay long term in a sexless marriage. I think that's, to me, enough of a stick, and I've witnessed it enough in my practice. I've worked with thousands of couples at this point. It doesn't end well. Or if it does, it ends in an unfulfilling relationship, and no one wants to be in that. On the flip side, though, you could also chase the carrot. And what would the carrot look like? One day going to Greece, eating pasta in Italy, the travel, the joy, seeing the grandkids, a loving, connected marriage relationship that lasts long term, the date nights, the walks, the hugs, the support when your elderly mother falls ill. That's the carrot, right? So why wouldn't we want to pursue the carrot? Why are we just running from the stick? Let's go after what we want. And for me, I think a deeply physically connected relationship is really important. There's my beautiful wife in the background. So
Hello. We can
going to get the girls
pull
at
that out. Yeah, no
school. So
problem. Okay, what's my next question? You just gave me a question. Oh, do you think that a marriage that has kind of been void of all intimacy is more at risk for infidelity?
yes and no. I think I think a lost moral compass is the biggest risk of infidelity because the reality is that nothing causes infidelity other than someone's disconnection from morality.
Mm.
Temporarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person. Again, doesn't mean they're a bad person because someone strays. I think they've done some very shitty, hurtful things. 100% doesn't make them an evil person by any stretch of the imagination. I know a lot of listeners will probably take issue with that. And again, in full disclosure, if my wife stepped outside of my marriage, I don't know that we would bounce back from that one either. So I'm not condoning infidelity in any way, shape, or form. But I definitely think you're playing high stakes poker in Vegas with your 401k savings when you're withholding intimacy or when you're allowing a lack of intimacy to play out in your relationship. I think people will eventually seek connection, and that doesn't necessarily justify a decision to step outside of the relationship, but I sadly think that it's something that happens. So yeah, I'd far prefer to play for quarters as opposed to play for my 401k. And I'm going to go to the garage and say, and I would say to a couple, go and buy a set of poker chips, dump it on the dining room table, and say, we could play here or we could play in Vegas. Where do you want to play? Let's play at home where it's safe, and let's start asking each other, how can we build that intimacy back in our relationship? But if we don't do this, if we don't, figuratively dump all those poker chips on the table, you're going to take them to Vegas, and it's probably not going to end well. So
And do you think that like dry spells are normal in relationships? Would you say that most couples run into places or spaces or phases where their intimacy is a little lower, whether that be because of unresolved resentment or just because life is busy, or maybe it is that you had a child and now you're still a couple months later trying to figure out life as new parents with a baby, getting your
mhm,
footing back with your new schedule and your new lifestyle.
for sure. I mean, you probably describe half my clients. When you're in that dry spell, it should still be a game plan to restore and repair that physical connection. It should never be swept off the table. So, you need two willing customers to take the medicine. And so if the medicine is going to be physical intimacy to really ascend to that deep, loving, mature, connected relationship, and certainly in that deep, loving, mature relationship is physical intimacy. If that's our goal, then we've got to buy into the vision, right? And so we may not have sex now. I may not be feeling it. I could be suffering depression, job loss. I may not even like you right now. There's tons of reasons why people don't want to be intimate with their partner. But if they can put it on the table as a destination that they want to get to, then at the very least, we've got two willing customers that are going to, explore how to get there. But if someone swept it off the table and is not even bringing it up and it's not even included on the menu, it's not even going to be an option that you could choose for dinner, right? So it's got to be there. You may not know how to get it back, but don't worry about how to get it back. And if I'm standing at the bottom of Mount Everest, I'm not going to ask in that moment, how do I get to the top? I'm going to tell you how I got to the top of Everest after I got there. But I needed the vision of standing on the peak of that mountain to find the gas in the tank and the motivation to start climbing, right? So they need that desire, that deep desire to want to have that back, and how they get it back, they'll figure that out. So
Do you think that there's a point of no return in some relationships, short of one or both partners saying, I don't want to do this anymore? If you have two partners that at least halfway want to make this work, do you think that there are certain things in a relationship that would make that relationship fail or would serve as that point of no return where it can't be repaired?
in my mind, the point of no return is basically when someone just gets off the horse and they say, I'm done, right? If someone's seriously contemplating that, what they need to do in that moment is hit pause. And I tell couples this all the time, and I've posted videos on YouTube about this topic. When someone thinks that this can't be repaired, their worldview is so saturated with pain that they have no ability to see hope, to see a better tomorrow. So what they need to do in that moment is just hit pause. And I instruct couples all the time, if you find yourselves in a deeply unfulfilling relationship, sit down at the dining room table together, take out an index card, and both of you write the word pain on that index card. And then go take that and put it in your sock drawer and say, now that we've put down the pain for 5 minutes and we could stare at our empty hands, what could we fill our hands with instead of that pain? Is there a bit of joy? Is there, I see you got a little bit of decorations on the shelf there. I'm assuming you have a nice home. I'm assuming you guys have jobs. Maybe you've got a cottage somewhere. You've got a ton of shared memories. There is some fun interactions. One of you makes the coffee, the other cooks dinner. There's a lot of good happening in your relationship. Put down the pain and do an inventory of what's good. Start asking, what is here that I would be devastated if I no longer had in my life? And if you could fill a sheet of paper with some good things that are happening in your relationship, even though your relationship feels painful in the moment, is that enough to make you rethink a decision to leave a relationship and say, actually, there is more here than just the pain? And what if we spent a little bit of time massaging that and exercising that and doing more of those good things that are happening? Because we're hitting pause on the decision to divorce, could we, inject a little bit more nitrous oxide into this engine and make it go a little faster? And if that's the case, if we can do that, would that be enough to save our relationship? So I think there's always time to hit pause, put the pain down, and look and see if there's more joy here. So
You've circled back to just like that communication, right? Of sitting down with your partner and having that raw, transparent conversation of here's where I'm at, here's what I'm feeling, here's what I want, because I hear you on not needing that, but
mhm.
here's what I'm seeking in our relationship and how can we get that to me, but also what do you need from me? What do you want out of our relationship? How can I show up better and serve you? Okay, so I have two kind of final questions and they're a little intertwined and it goes back to things that I see on your Instagram. And so it is boiled down to, how do we get men to lead in relationships and women to lean into their feminine, especially in a society right now where it is very boss babe energy?
Mhm.
Women are owning businesses, they are running their complete households. Not only does this feel good for women, but it also can be very exhausting. And so at the end of the day, maybe they don't have very much left to put into their relationship. And it can also feel very intimidating for men
Mhm.
to
Hmm.
see their partner, their female partner operating in this really masculine energy, even though they may be very proud of them and they love to see them be
Hmm.
successful and they
Hmm.
love to see them run their business or run the house or whatever it may be. At some point, that masculine ego does click on and say, who's the leader in this relationship? How do partners who are both very high performing and have high profile jobs reconcile that in their relationship, both physically, emotionally, and kind of like intimately?
Great question. You know, what comes to mind is fear. And what stops a man from leading in a relationship is he's afraid of failure.
Ah,
And what stops a woman from stepping into her feminine is she's afraid he'll fail.
ah.
Right. And so what they've done is they've created this culture of fear in their relationship. And see, men need to understand that failure is not participating, failure is giving up and not trying. If you stop trying, that is failure. Just because he tries something and he's not successful, that by definition is success, because as long as you're fixated on a goal and you're working towards it, you are successful because you're moving in the direction that you want to be moving into. And so I would say to that couple, you guys want to acknowledge that there's too much fear here and you've got to put that down and allow him to, well, encourage him to understand that just because he's not perfect doesn't necessarily mean that he's a failure, and doesn't mean that he's unsuccessful. And I think that's what a lot of men struggle with, is they don't want to take leadership, because if they fail, then they have to look at themselves in the mirror and say, I failed. And that's too much of a hit to a man's ego. And so then a woman with her nervous system and cortisol and adrenaline, she'll jump in and she'll want to problem solve and do everything. And my wife, you saw her leave to go pick up her kids. I can guarantee you, like, I work from home. I can guarantee you she still to this day thinks she's dropping her kids off and picking them up from school every single day of the week, even though I can do that. She just automatically thinks that that's her job. And so she doesn't want anyone to screw it up. So she wants to do it herself. Right. And she's not afraid that I fail, because I'm very good at picking my kids up from school. But either way, I think it's just a microcosm of, women have a very difficult time softening into their feminine because they're afraid that he'll fail. And that sends a message to him that I don't believe in you.
Hmm.
And what a woman would do well is to take that step back and allow him to trip and fall and make mistakes so that he can learn and grow. And you see it in parenting all the time. And your listeners are going to love me for this. Women really don't understand what it's like to raise children with someone looking over their shoulder constantly. And the way you said this, you shouldn't have done that. Why did you let them do this? Why did you let them do that? That is a man's lived experience, I'd say, for 90% of men out there. And it's very challenging. And I understand where women are coming from. Their mama, I'm married to a mama bear that she wants to, protect and make sure kids are, you know, you know, living their best lives. And if I'm overly harsh or trying to teach resilience and not being empathetic enough, and my wife laughs at me all the time. She's like, how can you be a marriage and family therapist and say that stupid shit to our kids? And but the reality is men need to trip and fall the way women need to trip and fall. And so it's a real challenge to allow a man to fail so that he can learn and grow and learn from his mistakes and not feel like you need to take over. So even though I tell a bunch of women to back off, I don't expect that they'll back off 100% of the time. But if you could just tone it down a little bit and give him a little bit of that space to be a man and to make mistakes and screw up dinner and buy the wrong tofu at the grocery store, as I do sometimes, you give him that opportunity to learn and grow. And I think you do your relationship a lot of good there. So
Y'all, this is not the first time you're hearing this. You hear me say this all the time, that just because your partner does it different doesn't mean that it's bad. And we know that the data shows that Children thrive when they have multiple caregivers that do things in different ways. It actually shapes them to be more resilient, better humans, more flexible. They get a wider perspective on life and how things are done, and exposure to different ways to accomplish things and to problem solve and to communicate. So, oh my gosh, that was so powerful. Okay, the last question is, what can we learn from couples that didn't make it?
That's a good question. There's so much there. I would say the biggest thing about couples that didn't make it is take the lesson that communication is the most important thing in your relationship. And it's not just this blank, we need to communicate better or we're not good at communication. That's too vague. I want to be better at communicating with my partner. You want to get very specific. And I think what couples do is they live too much in their feelings and their emotions, and they don't get specific in the day to day. They lose the ability to see when they're communicating well, when they're showing up well. They're too, they're steeped in this lack. I'm not getting this, I'm not getting that. And they lose the ability to see when they are getting what they want, and so they give over a decision to stay in a relationship or leave a relationship to a feeling rather than evidence. They stop looking for the evidence of what's good in the relationship, and they just accept this vague evidence that I'm unhappy. Right? I would never tell someone to leave a relationship because they're unhappy. It's way too vague. You have no evidence. You couldn't convict anyone on I'm unhappy, right? And the reason why is I would never go out and just because I got a new client, I have a VIP program that I run with people. Just because I got a big client, I wouldn't run down to Vegas and bet my entire mortgage payment on that. So I wouldn't make a decision out of extreme positive emotion, but I also wouldn't make a decision out of extreme negative emotion. So if I'm walking around feeling this is terrible, I'm deeply unhappy, that's an extreme negative emotion. And that tells you that you haven't weighed the evidence. So you want to get to the nitty gritty of what's good here. And that would be, those little things that are happening on a day-to-day basis versus what's bad. And if the good can't be massaged and grown and allowed to flourish, and if we put a little bit of effort to cultivate more of the good, well, then leave a relationship. But then at least you're leaving with a balanced view. But don't leave because we sucked at communication and I'm therefore unhappy and I've got these overwhelming negative emotions. So you should have very good evidence as to why you want to leave a relationship. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have loved this conversation. It's been so deep, and I actually think it's a conversation that so many people are yearning for, and they don't have a person to share it with. They don't have a person to ask these questions. They maybe come into the table with a lot of embarrassment and guilt and not really even knowing what questions to ask. They just know something in their relationship isn't quite working because, like you said, they're just not as happy as they thought they would be. So, Jonathan, truly, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being raw with us. Thanks for sharing what works in your relationship and what you have witnessed over thousands of couples. If someone wanted to work with you, learn from you, connect with you, how can they do that?
I would say what people don't understand about me is that I'm a workaholic and I'm extremely prolific. So what that means is I answer every single one of my DMs personally. I help people all the time on my DMs. I have a weekly newsletter that I send out every Monday. It's absolutely free. It doesn't get spammed. I don't sell people's information, so you can grab that too. Basically, where I'm going with this is there's so much you can learn from me. Come over to Instagram. I post every single day a reel. You can DM me over there. You can go follow me on YouTube. Both of those usernames are relationships with Jonathan, so either on YouTube or on Instagram. And then in both of those places, you'll find the link to the newsletter if you want to grab the newsletter. And if you really want to support my work, because really my work is now, I'm on a mission to save 1 million marriages. And I got blessed. I signed a book deal with a major US publisher back in May, which I'm pretty excited about. The book will be out in 2026. Apparently it takes 1.5 years to publish a book. I'm still writing it though, so there's still a bit of stress there. But yeah, connect with me either on Instagram, YouTube, grab the newsletter, and you'll get an announcement for when the book's going to be coming out in a year's time, 6 months, 8 months time, whatever. And yeah, those are the best places to follow me. So
that is awesome. Congratulations on your book deal. And you guys, thanks for showing up with us today in a country that has 50% of couples who are getting divorced. I wanted to provide you with an episode that really cut through the crap, and we talked real talk. We talked about the hardships that a lot of couples are facing, places that Jonathan and I have been at one time too, conversations that we both have had with our partners. Jonathan, you've been married a lot longer than I have, and you have children that are older than my baby. And I know that we have more hard conversations coming in our relationship. And I feel really blessed to be married to someone who is as committed and dedicated to having a healthy marriage and is much better than I when it comes to communication. And he's always encouraging me. And so I want to encourage you, if you are in a place where you feel stuck or you feel not seen, not heard, you're having that resentment built up, you guys take some time to, well, do some self-reflection. Maybe connect with a therapist, but more importantly, connect with your partner. Express what you want out of that relationship. Express what's been working, what hasn't been working, and how you see things getting better. And then truly be an open and safe space for your partner to share that same thing, because I think that is really going to be a pivotal journey on your communication restart with you and your partner. All right, you guys, I will see you in the next episode. Be sure to follow Jonathan on social media, and you can find me at Tranquility by Hee and at the.birth.lounge. Until next time, head to your app store and download the Birth Lounge app for evidence-based childbirth education and data-driven postpartum support delivered straight to your phone. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I love hanging out with you, and it is an honor to be your go-to gal when it comes to preparing for your baby. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a 5-star review and tell others why they should be listening to the Birth Lounge podcast too. You deserve to have a birth that you love with a provider that values your autonomy and respects informed consent without all the trauma that you so commonly hear about on social media. New episodes air every Wednesday and Friday. Hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. I'm Hee, and this is the Birth Lounge Podcast.